Hello and welcome to the Sage 300 training for Accounts Receivable. Hi, it's Amanda here from Marketing, and today I'm joined by William Woolmer, our Sage 300 expert guy based in Brisbane. And handing over to you, William.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay, so moving into it, the agenda today is to look at some core functions of Sage Accounts Receivable. So what we're looking at are these 6 areas. So what we'll do is go through each area, come back to here, and move to the next. A note administratively, I'm using Sage, the most but one recent version, 2020. There is a brand new 2021, but this is the version that those who are up to date will be using at the moment. Okay, so the first item on our agenda is using multiple contacts within Sage Accounts Receivable. This is a new feature in 2020, and it allows us to centrally maintain a list of contacts. So contacts are essentially individuals, they could be departments, and you create those within the common services of Sage. So for instance, here I've got a contact called Andrew, and we've given that a code, name, address, etc. So the key point possibly here is the email address that allows us to reach out to that contact via email. And you can also specify if contacts are allowed to use emails or not. Okay, you can also assign optional fields, which is a great feature within Sage. So if you need to know if someone's a member of a government department or qualified for something, or in this department in the customer or some such, you can assign endless optionals. Okay, so once you've got your list of contacts, and I've only got a few in here, they could be imported if you've got thousands already. They're central. They don't attach directly. They're not intrinsically a payable or receivables contract. They're just a contact. So you can have one contact. Andrew can be represented in your payables as well as your receivables. How do we do that? You come back into Accounts Receivable Customers, and in the customer that you wish to attach this contact to, you move to the contacts screen, and this is new. So those with an earlier version of Sage or have yet to activate this module, it's just an internal part of the most recent version. You don't have to pay extra for it. You'll get to assign contacts. So you can see this, we've done 2. So I'll pick here the next customer and I'll assign a contact. So click into there, pick a contact from the list. So I'll pick Andrew. And there's the email address that we have assigned to Andrew. And then we get to say for this customer, which is Bargain Mart, Andrew, who are you to us? Well, you're allowed to receive invoices and statements, and maybe that's it for the AR module. And then I can add another contact, and for this contact I can assign them different rights. So you're allowed to receive all of the order entry module forms. The order entry being the module that sells our items, as opposed to Accounts Receivable, a module essentially sells like simple services or simple items, which aren't tracked in a warehouse. Okay, so that's pretty much all you need to do to assign a contact to a customer. A nice note that those people who are maintaining your customer ledgers inside Sage are able also, if they have the rights, of course, to create a new contact on the run, which is classic. You've got a new customer, they've got 2 contacts, you click create, it drops you to that screen, and then you just create the detail you need. You may not need all their address information and so on. It may be as simple as a first name and a last name. And if I do this correctly, Jill Smith, excuse my simplicity, and then their email. So it's blah@blah.com. Okay, so that's the simplest way to add a contact. Consent to receive mails, hit add, and close. So now I'll create a new contact, allow them to receive something. You're only getting statements, and off we go. Again, this screen is already been there forever, and you've got this, what I would call now, base contact still available, so it hasn't been taken away. so that you are able to still address a single contact, or you can address multiple contacts. How does that addressing work? So what am I talking about? I'm talking about sending documents such as statements or invoices. Essentially, emailing is the key use. So in the processing screen of a customer is where we can control how we deliver documents. If you leave it at mail, that means you're going to print it out on your printer, stick it in an envelope, lick a stamp, stick that on, and go down to the post office. That's very 1990 of us. So you can still do it, or you can do something different. So if you choose these first two emails, they will go to the original customer or contact email. What do I mean by that? This is the original customer email. So it's the email associated with the entire group, not a person. The second choice there was contact, that's Jose. And so he's got an address, and all right, so if I was to choose this option, then it goes to Jose. Righto, so that's just standard stuff which has been around forever in Sage, and this is the new feature. So if I choose email multiple contacts, then it activates this grid that I've set here. And so if I'm in the AR invoices screen, I'm going to send one email to that one person because they're the only one with an X. But if I'm in a statement screen, then I will send two statements. I will send two invoices, two emails. So the key is to make this grid who you want to receive it. It's quite nice that the functionality is split between the different emailing screens inside Sage and between receivables and the order entry module if you're using that. So this is how I would expect to see going forwards people setting up emailing, because a lot of times there is a requirement that we do send more than one email. And in the past, Sage has had only the option to send one mail at a time, and maybe you've had to go to your outbox and resend or do something else outside of Sage, save it to PDF and send it manually. So I much prefer this. Okay, so if we then go and look at a form, and let's look at statements. So I've come in Accounts Receivable and pick up customer reports and look at statements. So at the end of the month, I'm sending statements, and the key is this delivery method, which is the same description that you saw in that customer card. So if we look at delivery method, hit the down arrow and choose customer. Print destination, by the way, means preview or printer, whatever you've got normally set. Customer means for every customer, look at their independent setup. And if their setup is multiple contacts, then that customer will get a statement for everyone who had an X under statements. And that's all you have to do. So this screen has not changed. That is the same, it's just that you've made the customer cleverer. Again, as always has been, when you send an email, what are you sending? It's a simple text mail, and it says something like, "Hi you, here's a statement from me. Have a nice day." And you can obviously change that. A mild note that maybe not everyone uses, you can have multiple different messages. So you can flip between, even just within statements, have multiple messages, either from different people, departments. You can make comments, but of course, you can also modify that message, save it, and then send that today. Okay, so this is, as I say, not just for statements, it's also for anywhere where we're allowed to email, and that the trigger for that to drag your mind to emailing is the word delivery method. The moment you see that, you know that you can use either single or the new multiple contacts. Okay, so really that's the heart of multiple contacts. I'll just make one, I'll round back to one comment I made originally. Multiple contacts are set up within the common services. So with that, you will need rights to that. So anyone who's using this and can't see it, talk to your consultant. If it hasn't been activated, it first needs to be installed. And if you're not at the right version of Sage, it's always worth getting there because you get these new features, but also keep up to date with all your windows. A note though, for those doing the administration of Sage, you may already have 1,000 contacts, and it is a pain to type things in. So of course, we'd strongly recommend that you import them. Where, as per normal for nearly all Sage screens, we've got export and import, and you're able to export out what your current data is. That gives you the template, and then you can import back in your 1,000 contacts. Remembering that at this screen, we're not attaching them to the customer or the creditor yet. That's done in the receivables or payables. The functionality we've just seen in the customer ledger also exists in the payments ledger. There's less documents to send out to our creditors, but maybe remittances is the classic. Okay, so moving back to the agenda. The second step that we're going to talk about is just creation of invoices. So I'll go through that. Now, this is core business if you're using Accounts Receivable as your invoicing module. Remembering that there's another module that can do invoicing, which is order entry, which a large number of clients use because it allows us to use detailed inventory, price lists, a lot of controls. Simple invoicing, even though you may still be selling items, you may be doing things like invoicing rent, or you've got summary services that you just wish to get out. So you can do a direct invoice. And this is controlled by a batch list, unlike other modules which have got immediate posting. For inventory purposes, this is batch posting. So we create a batch, we can add to it, come back to it tomorrow, get someone to check it. When it's happy, we can post it. If I just quickly look at a new batch and I'll press new, I tend to label them with who I am and then maybe what it is. So pick a pretend thing I'm doing. You'll see for control purposes, and also it's passed down to the document, but you can override it. So I said May, maybe I'll change it to October, something like that, and I'll make this whole batch the 31st of October. Cool. Customer number, pick a customer. There's one we did before. Now, the most important distinction when we're making an invoice in Accounts Receivable is what style of invoice is it? If it's a summary, we'll do that first. That allows us essentially to say a long line of data, give me some money. So you can say anything. This is the rent for May, $1,000. It doesn't say 2 times item equals extended cost. So that's important to note. Give it a description. There's a range of data which you probably won't have to change, like ship to locations. So both receivables and the order entry module allow us to, this is the master customer who's getting invoiced, but we're putting it in your ship to location. So it might be a branch, or you can even do things like the back gate versus front gate. And you can create and modify ship tos on the fly with that plus or review them. Okay, importantly, what is it? In Accounts Receivable, you have a one screen fits all approach. So you can create an invoice or a credit note. Now, credit note's essentially the only other use I'd normally see. Rarely we might make a debit note. So a credit note is essentially got all the elements of an invoice, but it's a minus and would happily attach to a prior invoice, although it doesn't have to. I'll start with an invoice, pick a date, there it is. A PO number, so if the customer has a PO, push it in there. A couple of more numbers, an order number and a shipment number. These are internal use, so you can control against other systems that you have or information that you've been given. And then we code. Now, if you're using AR regularly, you may have created shortcut codes. Like I'm selling labor, so you might have a code called labor. Okay, it just makes things straightforward to pick off a list. These codes can be very simple, but the beauty is that it does the revenue account for us. So when we're handing receivables invoicing out to wider teams, we do see distribution codes being used, and they're set up within the setup of AR. However, if it's the accounting team doing it, they'll probably say, well, that's a waste of time. I just want to do my own accounting. So they'll click on the general ledger code and pick their own account that they wish to use. Okay, so then we pick an amount, $1,000. Am I going to write a comment? So there's two places where we can talk to the client on the invoice, rent for October for blah street. Okay, so that's that. And I've also got a comment. Now, comment is a long field. So this is a 256 character field, which sort of goes out of control. And you can choose to print it or not. So if it's an internal comment, which is just for your system, say no. But if you wish it to print on the document, say yes. Okay, there's some optional fields and so on in there, but essentially that's the core. And then I can press insert on the keyboard, and now I can do a second line of coding. So I might want to code the same style of fee, but to a different revenue account because of splits. So there you go, it goes into there. So that's there and that's that. So this is corner office rent. Excuse my coding. Okay, and no comment for that. Beauty. So that's how you add a simple invoice. When you hit add, it jumps you to the next document. You can jump back to your entry using the controls on the entry level. And it's rather important that you can come back and forwards easily. I do recommend digging into this finder. It's basically just a list of all the entries you've done. And so that once you've got maybe a number of documents in one batch, becomes a very useful lookup. It shows you what you've entered and the amounts. So I like that very much. But I'm going to go to my next document and I'm going to leave this one at item. So I'm just going to give it a small description. I'll choose another customer, someone who's active. Run straight to the money and go to the item list. I don't really need to fill all that in if there's no changes today. And in the item list, as you can see, this is a small list of items. So not dissimilar to those distribution codes, but they have more functionality. So I'll sell you some cable. There's the description. I can override that, but I wouldn't normally. And I'll sell you 100 units or lengths or whatever it might be of this cable, which will be $94. So it's just A times B equals C, very straightforward. You may ask at some point, how do I change tax? The most important feature is just to click the little tax button, which is down the bottom here. Also F9 on the keyboard, so we're just on the keyboard. And I see a number of clients using this because while it's messier than a neat line, it's more information in one spot. So this detail screen has got all the same data that I've just been keying. There's my description, there's my unit price, etc. However, and there's my comment, which as you can see is a large field. However, I also get to play with tax. Now, this is a United States company, so it's got double level tax, so we can all be pleased, except for those unfortunate enough to actually have companies in the US in part of your group. It's great that we've only got one level, so we should be thankful for small mercies. And so you can change the detailed tax type and so on, and when you do that, then that overrides the tax amount. So you might have a tax code which one is taxable and two is non-taxable, not uncommon. So you might want to say this is a non-taxable health product, or you might want to say this is tax inclusive. So you can override that if it's been set, which it mainly is for Australia. So you're allowed to say this tax is in the price or outside the price. So I'll just leave that slide override there. Okay, when you do documents, here's my one line, you can go to the totals and see the tax summary to date. So you can see you've got an odd amount of tax here, just a few percent. But it's very visible. So you can see that without having to sort of dig around inside this screen and work out at detail level what the tax is. One more note on tax, and I'll move along, is that there is this option to override if you wish. So if you know better and you're invoicing, maybe there's a reason that 10% flat calculated by the system isn't making you happy. So you can turn that off and it will allow you to override the tax amount. So you can put in some other figure that is happy for you. Now, you don't have to allow this to people to access, but it's normally there. And if you do that, then you push that tax across each line. There's only one. And now the tax has been updated, $1.99. But normally that's a no-no, so you just put it back to automatic and it comes back and says, sure, $1.88, that's what it should be. Okay, A couple other minor points. Terms, that's when this is due, of course. You can override the terms code that's been selected, so COD, which means today. And then you can say, well, no, even though I've overridden it, I'll manually override it even further. So you can type a date, and that's the date that the age receivables ledger will use for this one document. And that won't affect the next time you create a batch for this same customer. So that's great news. Optional fields, as I mentioned, so if you wish to, on each document, this is not per customer, but per document, you can make very detailed assignments of dots of information you need. You might have some advanced courier information that's been asked here. You do have some shipping information here, which is standard, but you might have something else you want to capture. And that's just a setup. If you're thinking, well, maybe there is something extra I should use, my first comment would be, will it fit on the front screen? That's the simplest. It's in your face and it's already there. But if you need further and you don't know where you're going, just grab your consultant and say, I need some optional fields or I need some extra fields. The other thing that I'll comment on is sales split. So while it's not used most of the time, what it does allow you to do is capture the dollars against this document to a person or maybe a department. So it might be South Australia versus Northern Territory. So you need to know how much has gone through the T, but it doesn't match the customer because the customer, of course, has an address and all that good stuff. But if it's not, so here you are, this customer is at this postcode, but if that one customer splits across multiple territories, you may wish to use the sales split to control that. It doesn't have to be a person. So here it's Susan, so she gets a commission or some such. But if it's, it may be used for regions or other purposes. Okay, all right, so that's how you enter two sorts of documents, a standard and a summary. Note you can print the invoice from here if you wish to, one at a time. You can also print them in bulk over on the reports screen. If I look at one at a time, you can see it's already picked up my batch and my entry, ready for just this one. And oh look, here we go. So I can choose the delivery method, and referring back to my multiple contacts, if I've got 2 X's on invoice for multiple, then this will automatically send 2 emails with my associated invoice. And I'll just change it back to print destination just to show you. Now this is a default document, so it's not going to be very exciting, but I just wanted to make a comment on the form. I think on this one, I chose to print that comment. As you can see, I'm destined for great things as a writer when I grow up. So there you go. But it's great to know that you can help control the output on your document. Of course, you'd reformat it. That's a bit messy. So how do I get out of here? Escape, I suppose. I just can't see my screen very well because of restrictions on the presentation. Maybe we'll just do that. Okay, ignore it. Okay, so that's the summary or detailed invoices. I can't help myself. I've got to make the comment. Once you've created an invoice batch, you do then need to post it if you're going to present it to the to the ledger, and so that requires you to jump out of the invoice itself and come back into the, oh, crikey, I just can't get to the top of my screen. It's a bit depressing, really. How do I close current? I've just got a bit of restriction because I'm on a remote session and it's not allowing me to do that. Let me just knock that screen off because it's in my way. Don't muck with me or I will blow you up. Sage is fairly robust, so you can turn the screen off without causing it too many hiccups. And so back to that invoice which I've created with 2 entries. When I'm happy with that and it's been approved, possibly, then I post it. And that's the last step in the chain, which means that document is then available in the customer records. Okay. Organise and flag customer records. Oh, that's an excellent segue. What do we mean by that? I think there's a couple of areas that we're trying to address. Firstly is that obviously the customers have some inbuilt features which you can use to help control them. The first I'd strongly suggest is inactive. If you've got unpaid documents, you can't use that, but you could use on hold. So Acme Plumbing, they owe us some money, so I'll put them on hold. So it means the next time they go to raise the document, I get a very clear warning that they're on hold. If I find a customer without any open documents, then I can make them inactive. So I'll just dive into my Finder and look for customers with no balance. So you can see that all of my customers are very busy. So this is a test system. So I'm going to make a new customer, new test, just so I can put them inactive. So with customers, you don't really have to do a great deal of setup if you don't wish to, because that's up to you how much address information you add. But now I know this customer has no open transactions and I can make it inactive. Inactive means that not only do you get a warning, but you're also prevented from putting any further documents in, including payments. Or in this case, sorry, receipts. It's a customer ledger. So inactive is the most firm control you have. And of course, if you've got a customer that you're no longer dealing with, you may want to set it inactive. We keep the history, but we're no longer dealing with them. On hold's excellent flag as well. Another note for controlling customers is what we've been seeing up here, our notes. So I can have a note, warning, deliveries must be to a ship to. So maybe there's some note that you need to make. So when I raise this customer in an invoice, this note appears. So you can and give people rights to edit and delete those. And so you basically allow yourself to have a pop-up reminder against each customer. And that's a notes feature that's been in Sage for a version or two now. And you can see it's up here on that. You can fire up the notes from there as well. Another point about controlling or organizing customers is coming in a circle back to that import feature we mentioned earlier. So you're allowed to export all of your customer data. I'll just press export. Now, I think that I've got Excel in this environment. Let's just quickly see. What it does when you export it is takes all the data and bashes it into Excel format. And there we go. That's just the file. And here it is. Now, this is not something I suggest you look at for late night reading, but this is all of your data in a mildly friendly format. I mean, this says name cust, but we can pretty work out that these are the field names, and this is the data. So if we go down to my new data, there you are, new test. So what you say, well, you've made this big messy spreadsheet, so just to be clever, no, because you can then use this to import. So you may wish to, for instance, uppercase all the names. Now, if you knew how to do that in Excel, which I can't recall, I know how to do it in Word, but you may wish to change the names or some such, or add the addresses, 123 address street. Okay, so if I change data in here, and there's a large amount of data that I'm allowed to change to. So I've changed that as a copy because it was read only, okay. Now, so I've exported my data, I've reviewed it, thought about it, and now of course I can import it. So just quickly, I come into my customer ledger, find that file, which there it is, copy of, and hit OK. And there you are, you can see that it said one updated, that little note, and there we go, we've got a new piece of data. So this is just to make the comment that organizing your customers is not only fancy fields inside Sage, but also ability to pull it all out, give it a good spring clean, or use it for your own ad hoc reporting. If there's data in there, by the way, it has all of this sort of information about the last time you dealt with them. You know, if we pick someone that might have a last time. And their statistics could be exported as well, but this sort of information is very useful. Okay, so that's a key area in controlling as well. One last comment, there's always several last comments. is that controlling customers can be part of the payment or receipt process as well. So when you're processing documents such as invoices or receipts, you get to see those pop-ups if they're on hold and so on, but also you can look at the inquiry screens that are available to us as we use them and just use the finders. So here's a customer, and if I might make a new document. So this drill here, for instance, allows me to see all of the fields in the customer. So I might want to know whether what date they were inactive, for instance, or when we started first dealing with them. All that information is just one click away. And so, yeah, I find that quite useful. Righto. Moving along. Scheduling recurring charges. Sage has a recurring payable receivables function. A note that if you don't see it, there may be two reasons. One is that you don't have permissions for it. So Sage administrators under the admin area can assign roles and rights per person. So they're able to turn on the recurring functionality for you. But if it's not on for everyone, even say the Sage admin, that's because it hasn't been turned on in the back end. So under the options area of Sage, there's the choice to turn on recurring charges for accounts receivable. Once it's on, you then allowed to create essentially templates or potato stamps. So these recurring charges are, in a sense, an endless list of standard invoices that I wish to raise. So it's one document per invoice. Pick a customer who's going to be paying us this rent, and you fill down this form, not dissimilar to how you'd fill out an invoice. The most important thing you must select is the schedule, and you can set these up. Often these are monthly, so rent on a monthly basis. And what that allows the system to do is when we process recurring, it will process one of these invoices each month. It knows how to do that, and we just run the process. When shall we start processing it? Let's start processing it at the end of last month. Never expires, some numbers, here's some detail. I want a summary document. I'm going to code my own revenue account. This looks a bit renty. What have we got? I'll actually choose some rent. I'll correctly code it. There's a description. I can leave that or change that. Rent for month. Pick an amount. This is the standard amount. You can override this when you raise that charge. You can look at the totals that you've raised so far and the tax, but that'll do. So now I've made a recurring charge. I have several. I'm a bit keen on rent, so you probably see a bit more of that in there. So these charges, there could be 1,000 of them, or your monthly fees that you're charging out. So you set those up and you maintain them in this template area under customers. Not very difficult, and certainly you only have to type them in once. It beats doing it every month. How do you make it go? Under periodic processing, you just create recurring charge batch. And you do not have to specify very much at all. You just pick a month or a date that you're running it at. So I'm running it at the end of the month. So if that monthly recurring charge code, which it is, says run at the end of the month, then it will run. So I'll hit process, nothing to do. So what am I missing? So go forward a bit, process. So I've not seeing my charge, I went forward. So I just pushed it forward. So I've now run recurring charges for a number of months just to get something into the system. And we have a look at what it's created for me. So I've asked it to run recurring charges up to the end of next year, which I don't have to post, and I can delete it if I don't like it. But you can see here's one for the 1st of December. So maybe that rule that I chose is to run at the beginning of each month. And rent for month. So this is that rental that I chose. And if I go forward, here's the rent for the next month, January and February. So that's American. So essentially it's allowing us to run one invoice per month, and it can do a whole year's ahead of time. If you don't like the rest of this batch, you can just delete the entries out of the batch. So you could do that too if you decide that you only wanted a few of them. Okay, and I can change the amount. So this month, go, no, it's not that, it's something different. And this becomes a normal entry. So I'm allowed to run this batch and edit it, post it, print it, and so on as per normal. So recurring charges in summary are a handy way of shortcutting invoice creation. Normally you only do 1 month at a time. You create them under the customers area as a template, and you run them under your periodic processing as a very simple screen. Sales stats. So Sage automatically tracks information on processing going underneath the bonnet. And I've actually referred to it here briefly. Per customer, you have this statistics screen. And it tells us, in summary, what's gone on for the period chosen. So if you look at this customer, we've got 14,000 year to date and none in this period. So if I keep going back some periods, in period 9, I've got 11,001 document, but the whole year is 14,005 documents. And on some period, I've got a credit note. So if I go back a little bit, there it is. So now the beauty of statistics, they're right there, easy to access, and are quite immediate. However, they're not auditable from the statistic. I can't double click on that 2,000 to see the 2 documents that made it up. The statistic is captured and presented. So if you wish to see these as a list, then you go back to the standard reporting in Sage on transactions, or if an order entry, a lot of item reporting as well. So statistics are a mixed bag. I think they're useful, but take them with a grain of salt, because you don't see where the detail comes from. On that note, you can certainly export them. So when you export statistics, and you get that list of every period and its associated documents. So that's a great way of reporting on it, because you're in Excel and you can use it. Or you may just wish to print the statistics. So this may not be done by everyone, but file print is a great way of getting to the right print for whatever screen you're in. And in this one here, I'm going to choose activity statistics or period statistics. Now these stats, period is, as we've just been looking at, activity is by type. So if I just hit print on that, we'll see what that looks like. So it says, for this customer bargain mart, this is your outstanding, this is your highest balance, these are the dates, and so on. So essentially that's the activity screen, which it still sees as statistics because they're in summary. And cool. And so then the other way to do it is period stats, and you can also include the number of documents. Choose a year, for instance. So these stats are often ignored, but they have some value. And so now I get a grid per customer of the transactions, and this is per month. So period 3, 5, and 6 with 9, we did something, and this is what we did, and there's your totals. So not entirely useless as a. It's automatically being captured. It's already there. Worth a look. One point that I will make is that in the setup for transactions, I can allow edit of statistics. Useful in both customers, items, and salespeople. And if you do that, then you can override those figures if there's something that you need to add to it, if you're going to use those for control. And notice also this includes tax, normally excluded, but you can make that change. Be aware any change made to the setup only reflects future statistics. So if you're trying to capture great stats for 21 and you don't want tax, just better check that that doesn't have a tick. Where am I? I'm under the setup for options inside AR. Okay. Comment, order entry has its own reporting entirely. AR will capture the document anyway. So if I sell $1,000 worth of items in the order system, there's reporting on that. But AR will still say one document, $1,000. So that's essentially seeing it from two different points of view. Electronic statements and letters. So we've briefly touched on that, I suppose, in our look at contacts. So let's look at statements first. In accounts receivable, we've got customer reporting, which is called statements, letters, electronic statements, and I won't dwell too much on this. There's a few steps that you can look at in statements. Essentially, you pick your form, pick your destination. So if you choose customer, that's where we get the option to email and maybe multi-email, multi-contacts. I'll keep it to here. If you have nationalized accounting, now that's the concept where you have one head office and multiple branches. Nationalized accounting allows you to fully recognize each branch as a customer, so you can report on them and control them and chase them separately, but you can send a statement to the head office, maybe a consolidated statement saying each one line per, or here's all the detail for all of your branches, but that's your summary. But we'll leave that off for the minute. I'll just do some statements for some of our customers. Now, what are the choices? You can choose a range of customers. You can choose a range of sort of anything, only the people in the certain postcode and so on. So there's a lot of choices in there, classic Sage. And importantly, there's this extra tab in statements, which allows you to choose, for instance, those with $0 owing. Now, so you may have a case where it's a group of customers or one or all, where you want to see last month's transactions, even though they've paid them fully, because that's part of your reporting. So then you would include 0. So they come out. Otherwise, if they owe nothing, we don't send them anything. And there's some other transactional choices you can make. Okay, so if I hit print, it generates a statement, and the statement itself, a list of all outstanding transactions owing and their recent payments per customer. So this customer here is Ronald Black, and the form itself allows you to see a lot of transactions for Ronald, being busy, and then page 2 allows us to see they overall you owe us 4,000, so did pretty well from so many transactions. Okay, so that's the way that we, how do I close that? I think if I just close that screen there. Yes, so when you close the statement screen, either of emailing or printing to printer or just doing the screen, it'll always ask this question. This is a critical processing moment where you have to say yes or no. If you say yes, it marks the statements as printed. That's important because then the next time you print the statement, it won't reprint items that have been fully paid and printed once. So if you paid $1,000 off $1,000 invoice last month, it will show that once in this month's statement, and next month it won't reprint that because you need to tell them once they paid, thank you. But the second time around, no, that's old business. So it needs to know when it's done, and that's what this yes, no is. So I'll just say no and move on from that. So I don't want to record my test print. However, that brings us to the last major comment about statements, is that there is this concept down the bottom, reprint. So reprint's very powerful, allows you to pick up the old statement run exactly as it was run and regenerate it. So if you might, someone says, can you just resend last month's statement? And you go, well, if I recreate it properly now, it's going to be changed because this month they paid something for one of those invoices, and that may change the balances and so on. So what you really want is a photocopy, if you like, of the original statement, and that's what our system holds. So I want to make an additional copy, and this is the trick in that in statements, you pick from the finder all of the runs that have been approved. Oh, I should have approved that one, there are none. So you pick the run because the date that you ran it on is when it remembers it, and then you can reprint it. So just to make the comment, reprinting has the ability to recreate old documents, and you can see a list of all the runs if you've ever done one. Good news, letters use the same screen. So all the stuff we talked about except for reprint are there, including fancy criteria. What's a letter? A letter is a report in the background, which is written in the normal report tool. And that allows you to say, dear client, we are moving office, blah, 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 normal stuff. So you do that in Word, but it does the mail merge on the client's name and the address. And maybe it says, and we note that your terms are currently 7 days and we'll be changing that to 31. So all of those sort of elements can be picked up in the report from the data. So if you like, it's an internal mail merge and data merge within Sage with these controls. So I only want to pick up those who've got a credit balance and say, hi, we're in credit, what should we do about it? Or you may have some other rules, only those with a lease period is less than 6. By the way, these are all custom fields that have been created. You won't see this in your own. So once you create custom fields, a number of the drop downs then just show them. So the advantage really of using letters in Sage is that it's quite configurable as to how you select them, and of course repeatable. The disadvantage is the letter is not just in Word and you can't just go type it in. It has to be created in Crystal Reports, which is our report tool. So if you've got the designer, which is the writing tool yourself, you can do that. Otherwise, often it might come back to us and we will take your text and template and put it onto a Crystal report. Okay. On that note, we also see clients go, well, my letter is very dynamic and I change them often. So I'll export my customer list as we looked at earlier, and then I've got it in Excel and I'm a whiz with Excel and Word. I'll do a data merge and you can create it yourself. But so be it if you wish to do it that way. But however, I see this letter having some functionality because it's out of the box. Okay, so that's our last agenda item.
Okay, thank you, William. I think that concludes our session today. So thanks very much for joining us, and especially to you, William, for doing another session second time in a row, and you've done a great job as per usual. If you want to learn more about accounts receivable or other Sage 300 modules, reach out to your account manager as Peter, Philip, Taylor and Shelley. Thanks again for everyone for joining us, and that's the end of our session today. See you next time.